O todo-poderoso empresário contemplou seu trabalho. O mercado havia expandido seu império por todo o planeta. Os recursos estavam sendo explorados como nunca. Porém, ainda havia riquezas a conquistar. Aquelas que alguns inocentes sonhadores tentam proteger do mercado em nome do bem comum. Para o empresário, esta noção do bem comum tornou-se um único obstáculo entre ele e seu objetivo final. Transformar o planeta inteiro em uma mercadoria e declarar um mercado global. Assim, ele partiu numa viagem de negócios que mudaria a face da Terra. Desde o início dos tempos, o volume de água na Terra tem se mantido inalterado. No entanto, não podemos dizer o mesmo sobre sua qualidade. O empresário, um mestre na exploração da escassez, acreditou não haver mais escolha. Era hora de transformar a água em mercadoria e deixar que a mão invisível do mercado controlasse seu comércio.
Looking at the water situation around the world, we very fast began to realize that there was a shortage of water all over the planet. And with this lake here, I mean, it's a very unique lake, very good quality of water, and we just got the idea of looking to do something with it, you know, to get it out and to market the water. Like the flow from Gisborne Lake, of course, is it's 100 million cubic meters a year. So we were looking at taking 25 million, which is 1/4 of the flow from the lake. If you try to stockpile it, where's it going to go? Can't be done. It's going to go anyway.
I think that if you say there's an excess of water, that you're taking a very narrow view of what water does. Really, what that fresh water does when it reaches the ocean is it floats on top of the salt water. And as it moves out, it mixes up the nutrients and everything that is in the salty water down below and makes the places where rivers flow in, those estuaries, very, very productive.
I had to do a 2.5 or 3 year environmental impact study, and anybody else that want to take water from Newfoundland or anywhere else are going to have to do the same studies. This all has to be done. And then if there's available water, if it's a surplus of water, then we should sell it. It should go. We should do it.
Any province that starts to export bulk water for commercial purposes basically triggers the North American Free Trade Agreement. Therefore, water will become a tradable commodity just like anything else, cars or widgets or whatever else. That means that you can't favor your domestic private sector. You'll have to allow American corporations in. It means you can't just say one province can export it, but others can't. That means that once the tap is turned on to the United States or other NAFTA countries, we can't turn it off. We can't diminish it. We can only allow it to become greater. And we can place no environmental restrictions on that because that's a good between the two countries.
Today, of course, the moratorium is on, but the federal government seems to be not so hard to stand on bulk water anymore. I think they're beginning to realize that we have a resource here that's worth some money, and I think it's a good thing. You know, it's almost like saying that you're not going to sell your water. It's almost like saying Saudi Arabia saying, look, we're not going to sell our oil. It's the same thing.
We speak of these things as resources. And we do the same thing with iron and copper and nickel and things like this. But in all of these sorts of things, you have a choice. You know, if you don't use the iron, well, maybe the nickel would do as well. Or if you don't use the oil, or maybe gas or something would do as well. But water is very, very different from this because there is no alternative. There is only water. It is the essential ingredient of life. If you don't have water, you don't have life.
Cuando estaba muy arriba el agua, bajaba el agua, la gente sembraba calabaza, melones, sandía, maíz. Entonces eso se acabó. No más agricultura, pescado no hay, se acabó el río, se acabó todo. El agua llegaba hasta aquí. Estos palos eran para proteger que las olas no comieran. Entonces, era mucha agua. De aquí era el río doble que está ahí.
¿Y por qué no hay agua más?
Porque no hay, pues, porque Estados Unidos la tiene detenida y no hay agua.
This is a man-made delivery canal. It's called the All-American Canal. It takes water from the Colorado River to the Imperial Irrigation District. This canal takes so much water that it, more than any other canal or many other structures on the Colorado River, is the fundamental cause of the death of the Colorado River. This is the Imperial Valley Irrigation District, located in one of the driest deserts in the world. You know, in an area that gets less than 3 inches of rainfall a year, you have crops like alfalfa and wheat and many livestock. It's a huge landscape of agribusiness. It's not agriculture, it's agribusiness. On top of the former desert ecosystem, there is no living with the ecosystem. This is a place where resources are exploited and the goods are taken elsewhere for market. So it's not a question of people needing water, it's a question of big business needing water. Water belongs to the ecosystem from which it comes. That's the only way to look at water if we are to balance conservation of the ecosystem with use. Instead, people, especially in the United States, look upon water only as a commodity, only something to use for profit. And when that mentality is held up so high, you lose all other values.
I think it's time that we had a little drink of Gisborne Lake. Very clear, cool water. That's a very good water, there's no doubt. I would recommend it to anybody.
We do have to ask ourselves what we owe as a water-rich country to the rest of the world. We have to have that debate within the framework of water as part of the commons. Should it be priced? I don't know, let's talk about it, but not if it's going to some bottom-line investor to make a profit from. Should it be sold and traded? No. Should it be shared? Maybe, but it should be shared on humanitarian grounds. What these corporations are talking about, what these businessmen are talking about, what the trade agreements are talking about is taking water from the good, as a common good, to making it a private commodity and then controlling it and selling it for profit. This means that that water will get to those corporations or those cities or those places that can afford to buy it, and it will never get to the millions and millions of the world's people who are desperately needing it.
Todos los pájaros que oyes, pues están como los indios, no tienen derecho a agua. ¿Por qué? Porque este que viene, pues hemos podido sobrevivir uno. Todo lo que mira uno vivo en estos lugares no tienen derecho de vivir. ¿Por qué? Porque no tienen agua. Ni el viento que respiramos es de nosotros. ¿Por qué? Porque ya estamos todos contaminados. Entonces vemos muy mal todo. Todas las cosas no las vemos como algo grande y algo. ¿Por qué? Para nosotros es muy sagrado, pero para otros no. Es puro negocio.
O empresário contemplou sua obra e viu que era boa para os acionistas. Em suas viagens, o empresário muitas vezes se irritaria com a incômoda habilidade reprodutiva das plantas. Ele teve, então, uma ideia extraordinariamente ousada. Para acabar com essa situação de desperdício, ele decretaria que, a partir de então, sementes e tudo que fosse gerado por elas se tornaria propriedade privada.
Well, here, look, well, for Pete's sakes, look here again. It's all over again, the same as 1997. Look at all the canola plants that are growing here. One plant like this will produce from 4,000 to 10,000 seeds the next year. So this field, if I don't cultivate it or use some special chemical, it will be totally polluted with Monsanto's Roundup Ready canola. Monsanto can come out with a genetic altered canola plant, put it into the environment, damage and destroy my seed, and then get a lawsuit against because you're letting it grow on your land. Because they ruled it doesn't matter how it gets on your land, if it blows in or cross-pollinates or falls off of farm equipment, it's Monsanto's property. The judge said that I must give the seed and the plant to Monsanto. How can I give millions and millions of plants in my field all over? How am I supposed to get the plants out and give it to Monsanto? It's impossible. What gives Monsanto the right, in the first place, to receive permission to get a patent on a life-giving form? If we plant the seed the first time, when it reproduces the second time, they should no longer have a claim to that because they didn't reproduce it. The farmer reproduced it, and the farmer really didn't produce it. It was nature, it was the sun, the soil, and basically an act of God. I can't make a seed grow. Monsanto can't make a seed grow. Only nature can make a seed grow.
Whether or not you can invent life is a different question from whether or not you can invent a new seed. In order to be patentable, the subject matter, a new seed, must be new, it must be useful, and it must be non-obvious. It is certainly possible to develop innovations in seeds through a variety of techniques, including recombinant DNA and biotechnology, but not limited to those. If you want to increase innovation of that sort, patents are a very effective way of doing so.
The multinational companies like Monsanto do not want farmers to use their own seed. They want a farmer to come back, buy their seed every year. Then you have to buy their chemicals. You got to pay $15 an acre technology charge. You got to sign an agreement that you never use your own seed. So it takes the complete rights away from a farmer. Monsanto's police force can come on your land, we call them gene police, and go on your land for 3 years after you've grown it, go in your granaries, check your fields, go and check the seed in your granaries to see if you're not cheating. If Monsanto has to lower itself to a gutter-type level of a policy to sell their product, and in selling their product need a police force, something is wrong with the thinking and their policy of a company. To me, it's just plain wrong, wrong, wrong.
No one compels a farmer to choose one seed or over another. He or she always retains the freedom to choose. If a farmer finds the right or privilege of saving seed to replant it more valuable to him or her than the added value that he or she will get from planting seed that they purchase every year from a company which holds a patent, then they're free to do so.
They destroyed 53 years' work of seed development that I had done, and my seed was resistant to some of the diseases that we have here on the prairies in canola. All that is destroyed. I phoned up 2 seed companies in the last 3 weeks. I said I wanted pure, conventional, non-GMO canola seed, and they laughed at me. They said there is no such thing. They will not guarantee it. The companies have succeeded in contaminating all the canola supplies in Canada. So there is no such thing as choice.
Well, the idea that farmers have a choice under a system controlled by corporations is totally false. Because the corporations first ensure that farmers lose their seed. They go into regions and buy up all the traditional varieties, then sell their own seeds. They deliberately create a seed famine, and I have witnessed it in regions where the corporations have entered in India. The creation of a seed famine where only one kind of crop is available, and the farmers have nothing left. In that condition, to say the farmers have a choice is as false as it is to tell a bonded laborer that they have a choice to go and work anywhere. The idea of Navdanya as a commitment, my commitment for the rest of my life, is basically to have a biodiversity sanctuary, both to conserve the diverse species that we are losing, but not just to conserve them as a museum, not just to have it in museumized form, but to have them as seeds that farmers can collect and go into self-sufficiency, go into sustainability.
हम जब से इस संस्था से जुड़े हैं ना, ये लोग हम जो भी बीज कम पड़ता है हम इन लोगों से लेते हैं बीज। कोई भी बीज हमको दे देते हैं, जैसे मक्की है, धान है, मटर है, हर चीज़ सरसों है, कोई भी चीज़ है ये लोग देते हैं। 1 किलो ये देते हैं, हम लौटा के इनको 2 किलो वापस करते हैं। कोई सफेद कोई लाल को
For me, it was absolutely key for the defense of the plant's freedom and the defense of farmers' freedom to have seeds that were free of patents, free of genetic manipulation. And to us, Navdanya is an expression of the continued freedom of nature to evolve on her terms, as well as the farmers to be free of being bonded to the few handful of giant corporations that want to own every aspect of life, of the life of the planet and our own lives. A simple calculation that activists have done worldwide shows that patents on seed, and this would be pirated patents because most of the genetic resources and biodiversity which is being patented comes from the third world, patents would increase the debt burden on third world countries tenfold. The third world is already reached its limits of survival with the present debt. The debt created by this piracy would wipe out possibilities of life under conditions of poverty that have been created through colonialism and various waves of ingenious transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. And this is the last attempt being made.
Sempre em busca de novos territórios para conquistar, o empresário voltou-se para coisas microscópicas. Os territórios do interior do corpo humano. A essência da vida também deveria lhe pertencer, e a mão invisível do mercado deveria ser autorizada a extrair dela o máximo de lucro.
Myriad Genetics a breveté un test de prédisposition au cancer du sein et de l'ovaire qui est basé sur l'analyse de la séquence du gène BRCA1, donc qui est l'un des gènes de prédisposition au cancer du sein. Donc Myriad a en quelque sorte breveté la séquence de référence, l'étalon, la séquence normale. Et toute personne qui utilise cette séquence de référence avec n'importe quel outil moléculaire enfreint les droits de propriété industrielle de Myriad. Nous avons décidé de nous opposer à ce monopole parce que je dirais que réaliser ces tests génétiques, c'est quelque chose qui est bien sûr nécessaire pour immédiatement la prise en charge des femmes à risque, mais aussi pour, à terme, améliorer leur prise en charge. Et c'est en cela qu'un tel monopole va limiter la recherche.
Ah oui, où elle est la lumière?
Non, ils sont montés.
Ma grand-mère est décédée d'un cancer des ovaires suite à un cancer du sein. Ma mère est décédée d'un cancer du sein il y a maintenant 25 ans. Et ma sœur est décédée d'un cancer du sein il y a 4 ans. Donc cette année, quand j'ai déclaré mon cancer, je n'ai pas été extrêmement surprise. J'ai appris que c'était un cancer d'origine génétique en faisant le test donc proposé par le service d'oncologie génétique du docteur Stoppa-Lyonnais. Ça a énormément changé la perception de la maladie parce que, étant donné que dans la famille il y a 3 générations touchées, on se trouvait quand même à porter ce poids sans avoir d'explication. En faisant ce test de mon côté, j'ai apporté une réponse à la situation de ma famille, mais en même temps, j'espère que ça va faire progresser la recherche dans ce domaine-là, la recherche dans le domaine de la médecine prédictive.
Once you have the other blood sample? I was part of a cancer genetics network, which is a grant-funded operation for 8 cancer centers in the United States. It's funded by National Cancer Institute. And my involvement in that project was to set up a core lab so that we can offer genetic testing for all the cancer susceptibility genes for all the research projects that will go through this cancer genetics network. And that definitely included BRCA1 and 2 testing also. But a year later, we got a letter from the company Myriad Genetics, which has the patent on BRCA1 gene. They sent us this letter and saying that, we are infringing on their patent. So we stopped. If you can come up with a method which is as good as sequencing but less expensive, there needs to be research that goes to develop such techniques. But at the moment, even if you come up with such a technique, you cannot use it because you'll be stopped because of the patent.
Je pense qu'il va y avoir un autre débat important qui va concerner là l'utilisation de la séquence pour la prévention et le traitement. Si une autre compagnie, une autre société met au point un médicament permettant la prévention des cancers du sein, et spécifiquement des cancers du sein liés à une altération d'un gène BRCA1, eh bien cette invention sera dépendante du brevet Myriad. Ce brevet pose véritablement toute la question de la brevetabilité des gènes et de leur application future, puisque là on est dans le futur.
This is a very expensive business. To produce this drug at the end of this effort is about $500 million. If you do not have strong patent protection, not only for the drug at the end of the pipeline, but also for the intellectual property that's involved in identifying the gene and its function, nobody is going to partake in this effort.
At the turn of the last century, when the chemists were isolating the chemical elements in the periodic table, they and their companies put a lot of time and research into it. but we didn't allow them to claim patents on the actual products in the periodic table. We allowed them process patents. Those are patents on the processes they use to isolate the chemical elements in nature. But can you imagine any country allowing a patent on helium, oxygen, aluminum, hydrogen, titanium? It's ridiculous. We didn't allow it. Simply stated, these are discoveries of nature. The genes are exactly analogous. By what stretch of the imagination can a biotech company say they invented a gene that's the result of millions of years of evolution? The breast cancer gene, the cystic fibrosis gene, the Huntington chorea gene, these are discoveries of nature. Therefore, no matter what amount of money they put into it, it's not an invention, therefore it doesn't qualify.
Any of this genetics research is not valid unless the patient chooses to participate in that. It's their genetic material that the researchers study to find out what's the defect, what causes the disease. Now, if the patient is told at that point that, yes, today your blood will be used to find a gene that causes your disease, but tomorrow that information will be available to you only if you agree to buy that service from a particular company, I don't know how many of those patients would want to participate in this research. And I think that's the bottom line.
Ce gène fait partie de mon intégrité. Même si c'est la plus petite entité du corps humain, elle fait partie de mon intégrité physique et elle se retrouve dans d'autres familles. Donc elle m'appartient comme elle ne m'appartient pas et à la limite, elle fait partie du bien commun. Elle représente une entité qui vient de ma mère, qui elle-même l'a reçu de sa mère. C'est ce qu'on appelle le patrimoine génétique. On se retrouve avec un terme qui, à mon avis, ne peut pas rentrer dans un commerce. Ça voudrait dire qu'en fait, le corps humain a une valeur marchande.
Now imagine our children, if they grow up in a world where they think of human beings at the conceptual stages as invention, when they think of the genes, the proteins, the cells, the organs, the tissues, and even whole species as inventions. What happens to the intrinsic value of life when our children's generation grows up to believe that life is simply utility, intellectual property?
Le principe des brevets, initialement, avait pour but l'intérêt général, à la fois celui des investisseurs qui investissaient, mais aussi celui des chercheurs et celui des patients, permettant une meilleure prise en charge. Mais aujourd'hui, et on le voit avec Myriad Genetics, eh bien, on assiste à une dérive des droits conférés par ces brevets, et on n'est plus dans l'intérêt général.
I think we need to do the right thing here. The right thing is we need to understand the gene pool as a commons. It's a trust. It's our responsibility as part of the legacy of evolution on this planet. We ought to treat it with that kind of respect. We should craft a great treaty to establish the gene pool, micro, plant, animal, and human, as a shared responsibility in which all the governments of the world become the signatories to this idea of the gene pool as a commons. If this patent policy is not challenged, in less than 10, 15 years, giant life science companies will actually own the genetic blueprints of the human species. And they will increasingly own the genetic blueprints of all of the other species that make up millions of years of evolution. That gives them tremendous power to dictate the terms upon which the rest of us enter the age of biology, the biotech century.
Já havia um bom tempo que o empresário estava de olho nos serviços públicos. Pacientemente, ele promoveu a escassez necessária à realização de seu plano. E o momento chegou. Dali em diante, doenças se tornariam oportunidades de negócios e o sofrimento seria uma fonte de lucro.
Donc où est-ce que vous partez comme ça? Je pars à l'hôpital Sainte-Méris, c'est pas très loin d'ici, où on va m'opérer pour une hanche. Le chirurgien m'a expliqué que, il m'a dit, écoutez, si c'était moi, je vous opérerais demain. Voilà ce qu'il m'a dit. Mais
Il y a 8 mois.
il y a 8 mois qu'il m'a dit ça, 8 bons mois. Et il m'a dit, mais vous connaissez les coupures dans les budgets. Moi, avant, je pouvais faire 3 opérations de ce type par semaine. Et maintenant, j'ai le droit d'en faire 1 par semaine. Mais il faut savoir ce que c'est la douleur de l'arthrose. C'est horrible, c'est violent, c'est jour et nuit. Et la nuit, c'est, en ce qui me concerne en tout cas, c'est la nuit pire encore que le jour.
La liste d'attente, c'est conséquence des décisions politiques du gouvernement, avec tous les coupures dans le budget pour la santé, la fermeture des hôpitaux, la mise à la retraite des médecins, des infirmières. Tout a été fait pour faire des économies sur le dos de la santé de la population. Le gouvernement a donné comme raison, c'est qu'il est obligé de faire un déficit zéro. Mais en même temps, ils investissent davantage dans les grandes sociétés en disant ça c'est bon pour l'économie. C'est pas vrai. C'est une façon de détourner l'argent du système public et donner aux grandes entreprises et en même temps forcer des gens de penser à aller dans le privé pour chercher le soin.
Les gens veulent avoir des services, ils s'attendent à une qualité de soins, ils s'attendent à une qualité d'accueil, ils veulent avoir des services qui répondent à leurs besoins. Ils ont de tels services en médecine vétérinaire pour leurs animaux domestiques et c'est bien clair que dans certains cas, ils ont de la difficulté à avoir l'équivalent dans le secteur public.
Quand t'es malade, t'es malade. Quand t'as mal, t'as mal. Il n'y a pas de prix quand t'as mal.
Si les Québécois et les Canadiens veulent avoir une médecine à la fine pointe, s'ils veulent avoir une accessibilité rapide aux soins médicaux et à l'imagerie, si en même temps ils ne veulent pas voir le compte de taxes ou d'impôts augmenter de façon exponentielle ou très importante, je pense que le privé va continuer à se développer.
Les gouvernements disent, mais nous pouvons diminuer vos impôts. Combien? Quelques centaines de dollars, même 1 000 $, 2 000 $. Mais nous serons obligés de payer 12 000 $ par année pour une assurance privée. Et nous ne sommes même pas assurés que les compagnies d'assurance vont nous donner une assurance si on est trop âgé, trop malade ou trop pauvre pour payer.
This is an inner city public Montessori elementary school. And once a week, the school gives us space and we run a free clinic. In a country that is so rich, still there's so many people, there's over 40 million people here without insurance who don't have access to health care. At the same time that you have this brilliant technological advances, you have one of the highest infant mortalities in the developed world. And that's because we have a small group who can get brilliant advances and many people who have access to nothing.
that infection, he needs to go to PD.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, that's
So,
what I thought.
let's call a taxi.
Okay.
We don't even need to go
Do
there.
it there. Okay.
This shoe is amazing. Look at this thing. I mean, that's how, they were taking care of it. And it's not any fault of theirs. It's just, sometimes you don't have access to the better medical care. So.
We are trying to make a difference one person at a time. Even though we need to make a difference in the whole country, sometimes those changes take very long to occur. There are powerful forces that are preventing them, that are going to take care of their own vested interests, like the insurance companies, like the pharmaceutical companies.
I began my work in managed care, working as a medical reviewer, and very quickly, I was told as a physician I was expected to keep a certain % of a denial rate, that I wasn't to trust what physicians said about their patients, that I was to try to find ways to keep them out of the hospital. And there was a dramatic moment where a request came across my desk that involved a patient that required a heart transplant in a hospital outside of our network, which would have been very expensive. We would have had to pay full charges. And so I was expected to deny this. And when I guess the gravity of what I was doing was brought home when I called his physician, and I told him, I said, we can't approve this. And he said, you've just issued a death sentence. After years of reflection, I realized that I, as a physician, had caused the death of a man. And instead of being held accountable morally and professionally, I was promoted. I got better jobs as a result of it. I was a better medical director. I received accolades, for being tough enough to make the kind of economic decision that saved a company, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
How can you leave health to the market forces? How can you leave someone's health, someone's happiness to the market? It's not like fish. It's not a commodity that's to be bought and sold. Health is part of the right of every individual in a community or in a society. It's part of a sign of a mature society. It's a society that's ready to take responsibility for the health and well-being of every individual that lives in that country.
Au bout de la ligne, c'est une question de valeur. Qu'est-ce que nous, comme société, nous voulons? Est-ce que nous croyons dans le bien commun ou est-ce que nous voulons un système qui va donner des soins particuliers pour quelques-uns? Si c'est ce que nous voulons faire comme choix, comme société, allons-y. Mais je pense que la plupart de la population ne veut pas donner notre santé pour enrichir quelques actionnaires des grosses sociétés. Et c'est ça ce que le gouvernement est en train de nous faire. Et nous sommes en train d'être fait avoir.
C'est bon. Ça y est.
O empresário sempre se opôs ao Estado, essa instituição política que os cidadãos estabeleceram para assegurar o bem comum. Então, ele dedicou seus esforços para levar o Estado a atuar de acordo com seus interesses. Mas, apesar de algumas conquistas inegáveis, nesse dia o empresário aprendeu que a vitória ainda estava distante.
Há 5 anos, as indústrias brasileiras, principalmente oficiais, começaram a copiar e a produzir os medicamentos antirretrovirais que, sob a nossa lei, não estavam protegidos por patente. estamos produzindo e estamos fornecendo com preços que são quase 80% menores do que os medicamentos de marca. Os próximos medicamentos que nós precisamos estão protegidos por patente, segundo a lei nacional. Então, nós estamos negociando com os laboratórios produtores para ver se chegamos a algum acordo. Se não chegarmos a um acordo, a decisão do governo é de romper as patentes, quebrar as patentes, e isto é previsto na nossa lei, ou seja, em caso de emergência nacional, de urgência nacional, de interesse público, nós estamos autorizados a romper a patente.
Quando eu descobri que tinha o vírus HIV, em 1990, não era fornecida a medicação pelo Estado. Saía em torno de $1.200 por mês, $1.200 a $1.500 por mês para comprar a medicação, né? O meu salário era mais ou menos isso, $1.500, um pouco menos, dependendo da cotação do dólar no dia, mas em torno de $1.500. Tchau, obrigado. Então, na verdade, a medicação sendo distribuída gratuitamente fez com que, no Brasil, as pessoas começassem a viver com AIDS e não apenas a morrer de AIDS.
Nous avons une baisse de mortalité, environ 50%, depuis 1996. Quand on a commencé ce programme, nous avons des médicaments comme ça que nous achetons des compagnies multinationales. Il veut dire qu'ils suivent gagnant d'argent avec nous. Et nous avons ces médicaments-là qui sont produits ici au Brésil, sont génériques, produits ici au Brésil. Pour les patients, le dé n'avait pas de coût.
O Brasil, o que um governo deve fazer para salvar a sua população? Não fornecer o medicamento? Qual é a saída? Para mim, é fornecer, aplicar a licença compulsória, que os Estados Unidos está questionando do governo brasileiro, mas que é permitido na TRIPS. Eu sei que as empresas querem resguardar os seus investimentos e fizeram patentes, mas tem que olhar também o direito humano da vida. Então, não há lucro que justifique a morte de nenhum cidadão, em qualquer parte do mundo.
Na verdade, as leis de comércio internacional ou de patentes não estão aí para proteger a vida de ninguém. Elas estão aí apenas para proteger o capital das empresas multinacionais. Então, a gente tenta, de alguma forma, quebrar a lógica capitalista, porque a gente sabe que a lógica capitalista não pressupõe o bem-estar da população no sentido mais amplo.
Não podemos considerar o medicamento como qualquer outro produto de consumo. A nossa discussão é que os custos e, principalmente, o lucro das empresas produtoras é exagerado. É isso. É incompatível com o valor do próprio produto, mesmo considerando ganâncias, mesmo considerando investimentos futuros. está fora da realidade. É essa a questão.
O empresário estava ficando muito irritado. Comentários como esses deixariam seus acionistas muito preocupados. Ainda não era hora de descansar. O empresário sabia que deveria fazer alguma coisa para prejudicar as instituições políticas. No fim de semana, ele promoveu um grande encontro. Temendo ficar para trás, todos os chefes de Estado correram para lá. A agenda do encontro, mantida em segredo, não podia ser mais clara. Abolir todas as regulamentações nacionais que pudessem obstruir o comércio e, acima de tudo, forçar as nações a entregar a responsabilidade sobre o bem comum às forças de mercado ou sofrer graves sanções.
The Canadian government has agreed to pay $13 million in damages to the American company Ethyl Corporation. Ethyl produces a gasoline additive that Canada has judged to be harmful to health.
The American government will apply sanctions to the European Union following the ban on European imports of hormone-treated beef.
Courier UPS has accused Canada Post of unfair competition and is suing the Canadian government for $140 million. A UPS victory could impact the scope of all Canadian social programs.
The NAFTA Tribunal has ordered the Mexican government to pay $16.5 million to Metalclad, an American company specializing in the burial of toxic waste.
What's happening with these trade agreements, and particularly this Chapter 11 of NAFTA, where corporations can, for the first time, sue governments of another country, what's happening is that it's created a constitutional body of law that overrides domestic law, including environmental, health, and safety laws. So governments are basically relinquishing their sovereignty and their right to establish regulations and standards to provide social programs for their people to transnational corporations and international trade agreements. And basically they can say, well, poor us, it wasn't our fault. Of course we got elected promising to keep public health care, but alas, we had to lose it through these trade agreements.
If we continue to enclose all of the great ecological commons into property owned by a few companies, we risk increasing geopolitical tensions, increasing possibilities of war, increasing reduction of the earth to utility and just to resource management. What I'm saying here, I want to be clear, is we need balance. I believe we have to have commerce. I believe that we need to have a market. But it can't be the sole arbiter for how we relate to each other, our common nature in the earth we live in. When commerce becomes the sole arbiter, then we end up to be just a crass, commercial, utilitarian-based civilization. We lose our humanity, we lose our intimacy, we lose our empathy, we lose what makes life important.
If good is not common, if there's no common good and there's only private good, that private good is hurting someone somewhere on this planet, some species somewhere. When humanity works and does agriculture as if it's the only community that has to be fed and works against the common good of other species, we get non-sustainable agriculture. We eventually undermine our own food security. Common good is the result of give and take. It's a result of reciprocity. It's a result of mutuality. Forgetting the common good is a result of grabbing, piracy, and theft. And of course, some people prosper, but they prosper at the cost of others, and they prosper at the cost of the planet. That kind of prosperity is not prosperity.
I believe that if we do not maintain the concept of a commons, that our collective interests are served through institutions that see us as more than our individual selves, but as a sum of something larger. If we don't see natural resources and nature as something that belongs to the earth and all humanity, if we don't see that we have certain fundamental rights as human beings and citizens to have social services, social programs, if we lose that notion of the commons, I think we're going to find a world in which nothing is valued except if it has money. And in that kind of world, many, many, many people will die. Many people are dying because only those who can afford to live in that system can buy clean environment, can buy clean water, can buy the kind of food that the rest of the world doesn't have. Only those people will live. So the keeping of the commons is not only a keeping of a set of values and of a heritage, but without a commons, without the notion of a commons, we won't survive.
Nesse dia, a mão invisível do mercado revelou suas reais intenções.